Well, the big story today, the Indian telecom sector has seen significant changes over the past 2 decades, and so the government believes it is time for a regulatory overhaul. It has proposed a new telecom bill which aims to replace the 3 laws that currently govern the sector: the Indian Telegraph Act of 1885, the Wireless Telegraphy Act of 1933, and the Telegraph Wires Act of 1950. While there is a need for change, the draft bill, which is up for public consumption and for feedback till the 20th of October, has raised some concerns. For instance, the bill proposes to bring messaging apps under licensing purview, provides powers to suspend internet services, and makes KYC mandatory for user verification for telecom service providers. Now, while the government insists that the bill will give a fillip to the ease of doing business, there are concerns the new bill could tantamount to regulatory overreach. Let me quickly take you through just some of the key highlights. The draft bill intends to widen the definition of telecom services to include OTT messaging platforms, radio, emails, and even video calling services. This will require entities like WhatsApp, Google, and Cisco to secure a license from the government's telecom department. Now, secondly, the draft bill may take away much of the telecom regulator's powers. Currently, the TRAI is an independent statutory body which takes the final call on license issuance. But if the draft bill is passed, that power will rest with the government. For the first time, the draft telecom bill clearly provides powers to the government to suspend internet services. No provision has been added for a judicial oversight or a review committee to assess the need for internet suspension. Moreover, the draft bill makes user verification via KYC mandatory for telecom service providers. It has also proposed a 1-year jail term for users providing wrong information. Well, those are just some of the highlights of the proposed bill, which is up for discussion. The draft bill, as we said, has asked for comments to come in by the 20th of October, which is the deadline. To take the discussion forward, I'm now joined by R Chandrashekhar, former Telecom Secretary, Supreme Court lawyer Gopal Jain, Apar Gupta, Executive Director at Internet Freedom Foundation, and also with us is Rahul Matthan, Partner, Telecom, Media and Technology at Tri-Legal. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Gopal, let me start by asking you, I think there is no argument in saying that we do require a regulatory overhaul. We require a legislative framework that is more aligned and in tune with the current realities of the telecom sector as well as the economic scenario. But the problem that many experts are expressing with respect to this draft bill is that A, it's too wide. B, and I want to address some of the risks that you are highlighting, that this bill seeks to have compliance parity with traditional service providers. That's one of your key concerns. And one of the other concerns that you're raising is that this, in fact, gives telecom service providers enhanced leverage, outsized leverage over OTT providers, DTH service providers, and others. So let me start by asking you, Gopal, what your problems are with the draft bill in its current form.
Well, thank you, Shereen. As you rightly said, outdated and archaic laws of a previous century of a colonial era have to make way for modern, light touch frameworks which provide a fillip to our digital ecosystem. And as we transit into this, the law must be supportive of these businesses, must promote ease of business, and must have clarity in terms of both definition and the contours of the subject matter which it seeks to regulate. Now, let's take the first point. Telecom is all about hard infrastructure. It's called the network layer. Then you have a software layer and the services side to it, a services network. These two are not substitutable. They operate in different spheres. The OTTs have been regulated under the IT rules, which was made as recently as March 2021. And there's also likelihood now of a Digital India bill coming. So the entire IT and internet-based ecosystem will perhaps be regulated by that. But when one looks at the definition of telecommunication services, it is what I call a sweeping definition, perhaps includes everything that there is, both on the hardware side, the IT side, internet side, and perhaps more. So first is synchronization of intent with the language. The intent is to have a modern legislation meeting with the advancement of technology and quote unquote being updated to contemporary times. Then the language of the law must reflect it, must be simple and clear, and clearly define the jurisdiction limits of the various authorities. If not, you would have turf wars, as you rightly said, DOT versus METI, TRI versus DOT, MIB versus DOT. So we can have a slugfest. It will be a regulatory battlefield. So the way forward is to have one enactment instead of having a slew of enactments, one for the telecom hard infra space, the other for the OTT and the internet space. There has to be healthy coexistence so that there is no dispute and the purpose and the objective of the law of having purpose-specific legal regimes and regulations is met. That will be what we say a robust digital ecosystem and legal frameworks commensurate with what it requires in the future.
Several important issues that you raised there. So let me bring the other lawyer into the conversation as well. Rahul, many thanks for joining us. Let me just pick up from where Gopal left off. Sweeping definitions, that's one of the concerns that Gopal has put on the table. Jurisdictional overreach, jurisdictional overlap seems to be the other concern that he's putting on the table, which will in fact lead to regulatory turf wars, a regulatory battle, which will in fact not be helpful when we talk about the ease of doing business, which is what the bill is intending to do. So add to the list of risks that you see with the bill in its current form and how you believe the government ought to address those. We have till the 20th for comments to come in, so let's try and put some on the table here today.
So, I'd like to both agree a little bit with my good friend Gopal and disagree a little bit with my good friend Gopal. I think, I don't think that this is archaic laws being brought into a new framework. I think essentially what the government is doing is it's taking a new approach to regulating the sector. What the government is doing is it's bringing a lot of the provisions that otherwise used to be in licenses into the body of the legislation, which I think is a good thing. And I think we've got to recognize that this is something that is required at this point in time. And that we've got to move away from the old framework. But having said that, I think the concern, as you rightly put it, is that all this good work of bringing provisions into the main body of the statute so that it can get legislative sanction, in a sense, is sort of upset because what happens with wide definitions is that the definitions now bring within its ambit a whole range of things, which are essentially outside the realm, as Gopal said, of what the telecom regulator should do. And I very much agree with the way he framed it. I think when you look at the triumvirate of legislations that are coming up, the Digital India law, the telecommunication law, the privacy law, essentially what we're envisaging is that, at least I hope that's what we're envisaging, is that the telecom law will govern the hard network. The Digital India law will govern the soft network. And privacy, of course, it governs what is done on the network with regard to the privacy of personal data. So I think this is an easy fix. I think we just need to take a look at the definitions, narrow the definitions down, like you've mentioned with telecom services. I think we've got to make it just messages that are delivered over the hard network and not messages on top of those messages. And then we can actually have what we intended, which is to have a legislation that is modern and at the same time fits in with the rest of the legislative frameworks.